I'm Allison, 25, and I still remember the exact moment my family broke my heart. Walking into my childhood home after a semester away, I found my belongings stacked in hallway boxes. My room, my sanctuary, had been transformed into a gaming paradise with expensive equipment. My brother Brandon sat there, streaming to his fans, acting like nothing was wrong. When I confronted my parents, they shrugged as if I was overreacting. That day, I realized family doesn't always mean what you think it does, but 1 year later, they would learn exactly what they'd created. Before I dive into this story, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family betray your trust. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. While most kids were enjoying carefree summers, I was working part-time jobs, maintaining a perfect GPA, and building my college applications. My hard work paid off when I received a partial scholarship to Westlake University, a prestigious school known for its competitive business program. Even with the scholarship, tuition was expensive, and I had to work throughout college to make ends meet. Our family wasn't wealthy, but we were comfortable enough in our middle-class suburban home. My father Howard worked as a sales manager at a local company, and my mother Janet was an administrative assistant at an insurance firm. We never had luxury vacations or the newest gadgets, but we had enough, at least that's what I thought. My younger brother Brandon was different from me in every way. While I was studious and driven, he was charismatic but unmotivated. His grades were mediocre at best, but he had a natural talent for video games. From the age of 13, he became obsessed with online gaming and dreamed of becoming a famous streamer. The contrast in how our parents treated us was subtle at first. When I brought home straight A's, my mom would smile and say, "That's nice, honey," before returning to whatever she was doing. But when Brandon won a local gaming tournament, my parents threw him a celebration dinner and proudly posted about it on social media. For my 16th birthday, I received practical gifts, a used laptop for schoolwork and some clothes. For Brandon's 16th birthday just 2 years later, my parents surprised him with a gaming computer that cost nearly $2,000, money I later learned they had borrowed from my grandmother. "Brandon needs special support to find his path," my mother would say whenever I questioned the disparity. "You've always been so self-sufficient, Allison." Self-sufficient became code for, "We don't need to worry about you," while Brandon's needs always took priority. When I was accepted to college, my parents seemed proud but distracted. The day I left for university, they dropped me off early because they needed to get back for Brandon's gaming event. Despite everything, I thrived at Westlake. I maintained my scholarship, worked 20 hours a week at the campus coffee shop, and built connections with professors who recognized my potential. My dream was to graduate with a business degree and eventually start my own company. Then came the financial crisis that would change everything. During my junior year, the coffee shop where I worked closed permanently. Job opportunities near campus were scarce, and my savings were quickly depleted. My scholarship covered only 60% of my tuition, and the remaining balance for the upcoming semester loomed over me. With no other options, I made the difficult decision to take a semester off to work full-time and rebuild my savings. It was a temporary setback, I told myself. I would return to Westlake within 6 months. I called my parents to explain the situation, expecting sympathy or perhaps an offer to help. Instead, my mother said, "Well, you can come home for a while, I suppose. We have your room, though it's a bit different now that Brandon's been using it for his computer setup sometimes." Sometimes was the keyword that I didn't question enough. When I arrived home 3 days later, exhausted from the 6-hour bus ride and emotionally drained from having to pause my education, I wasn't prepared for what awaited me. My childhood bedroom, the pale blue walls I had painted myself, the bulletin board filled with achievements, the bookshelf with my favorite novels, was completely transformed. Gaming posters covered the walls. An elaborate desk with dual monitors, professional microphones, and blinking LED lights occupied the space where my bed once stood. The closet that once held my clothes now stored Brandon's streaming equipment and merchandise. Most shocking was learning that this transformation hadn't happened overnight. My parents had been planning it for months, even while I was still at school, believing I had a place to return to if needed. Brandon's followers have doubled since he got the new setup, my father explained proudly, as if that justified everything. He might get a sponsorship soon. This could be his career. Where am I supposed to sleep? I asked, still stunned. My mother pointed to the living room couch. Just temporarily, she assured me. Until you go back to school. That night, lying on the uncomfortable couch with my belongings still in boxes around me, I realized how disposable I was to my own family. The room I had grown up in for 18 years had been erased as if I had never existed, all for Brandon's fleeting internet fame that generated barely enough income to cover his snack foods. The next morning, I confronted my family at breakfast. Brandon was still asleep, having stayed up until 4 a.m. streaming to his followers. My parents sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through their phones as they ate cereal. "We need to talk about my room," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. My father sighed without looking up. "Allison, we've already discussed this." "No, we haven't," I insisted. "You made a decision without even telling me, and now I'm sleeping on the couch in my own home." My mother put her phone down. "Honey, Brandon needs that space for his career. The lighting is better in that room, and it's quieter for his streams." "And what about my career?" "I'm only home temporarily until I can go back to school." "That's exactly it," my father interjected. "You're just passing through. Brandon lives here full-time. It makes sense for him to have the proper setup." "I lived in that room for 18 years, I argued. "All my things?" "Your things are in boxes," my mother interrupted. "We didn't throw anything away. Besides, you're an adult now. Brandon is still finding his path." The conversation was interrupted when Brandon shuffled into the kitchen, yawning dramatically. He was wearing merchandise from a popular streamer, clothes I knew cost more than what I'd spend on an entire semester's wardrobe. "What's going on?" he asked, grabbing a bowl. "Allison is upset about the room situation," my mother explained. Brandon rolled his eyes. "It's not a big deal. I need proper equipment to compete in this market. Do you know how many people are trying to make it as streamers? The setup gives me an edge. And where am I supposed to live while I'm home?" I asked him directly. He shrugged. "The couch isn't that bad. I slept there when my friend stayed over last month." "For one night, Brandon." "I'm talking about months." "Not my problem," he mumbled, filling his bowl with the expensive granola he had specifically requested my parents buy. "I have a stream scheduled at noon. I need to prep." As he walked away, my father turned to me. "See how dedicated he is? He's building something real here." I stared at them in disbelief. "I'm building something real too. I'm getting an education. I'm working toward a stable future." "College isn't the only path to success," my mother said dismissively. "Look at all these young internet stars making millions. Brandon has 5,000 followers and made $120 last month," I pointed out. "It's a starting point," my father defended. "These things take time to grow." I realized then that no argument would sway them. In their eyes, Brandon's potential internet fame was more valuable than my actual achievements and realistic goals. That afternoon, I called my friend Jenna from college who lived about an hour away. She was shocked when I explained the situation. "That's insane," she said. "They kicked you out of your own room for a gaming setup? Are they serious?" "Completely serious," I confirmed. "I don't know what to do. I can't live on a couch for months." Jenna offered her couch in her tiny one-bedroom apartment, but it wasn't a sustainable solution. She already had a roommate in the bedroom, and her place was barely big enough for 2 people. Over the next week, I applied for jobs in my hometown while trying to process the betrayal I felt. Each night on the couch, I would hear Brandon laughing and talking to his viewers through the walls, using the space that should have been my sanctuary. My parents continued to minimize my feelings. "You're being dramatic," my mother said when she found me crying one evening. "It's just a room." But it wasn't just a room, it was a symbol of my place in the family, and that place had been given away. The situation worsened when I overheard a conversation between my parents in the kitchen 3 weeks after my return. I had been pretending to be asleep on the couch, but their voices carried through the quiet house. "Brandon needs a new graphics card for the upcoming game release," my father was saying. "It's $800, but he says it's essential for the quality of his streams." "We're already stretched thin this month," my mother replied. "What about Allison's storage boxes?" "There's that collection of vintage books her grandmother gave her. We could sell those online, she hasn't even unpacked them." "Good idea," my father agreed. "She probably won't even notice they're gone." I lay frozen on the couch, a wave of nausea washing over me. They were planning to sell my treasured possessions, irreplaceable gifts from my grandmother, to fund Brandon's hobby. In that moment, I knew I couldn't stay. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I quietly packed my essential belongings into my car. I left a note on the kitchen counter that simply read, "Since my presence and possessions are clearly unwanted, I found somewhere else to stay. Don't sell my grandmother's books." I didn't specify where I was going because, truthfully, I wasn't sure myself. All I knew was that I needed to leave before I lost not just my room, but every part of myself that mattered. I drove to Jenna's apartment that night, arriving at 2 a.m. Despite the late hour, she welcomed me with open arms, setting up a makeshift bed on her small living room floor. It was cramped and uncomfortable, but it was safer than staying in a home where my belongings were considered collateral for Brandon's streaming ambitions. "You can stay as long as you need," Jenna assured me, though we both knew her tiny apartment couldn't accommodate another person for long. The next morning, I began my job search in earnest. After a week of applications and interviews, I secured a position as a waitress at a local restaurant called Harvest Table. The owner, Kyle, was a gruff but fair man in his 40s who valued hard work. "I need someone reliable," he told me during the interview. "Someone who shows up on time and doesn't complain about the occasional double shift." "That's me," I promised, and I meant it. I needed this job not just for money, but for survival. Working at Harvest Table was exhausting. The hours were long, the customers sometimes difficult, and the pay barely enough to save anything after covering basic expenses. The worst part was running into people I knew from high school, former classmates who had heard rumors about why I'd left college. "Allison? I thought you were at that fancy university," said Tyler Morgan, a former classmate, as I served his table one evening. "I'm taking a semester off," I explained briefly, not wanting to share the humiliating details. "That's too bad," he replied with fake sympathy. "My cousin follows your brother online. He's really blowing up, huh?" I forced a smile and walked away, fighting back tears. It seemed that even here, Brandon's minor internet fame overshadowed my actual accomplishments. 2 weeks after leaving home, I finally called my parents. Part of me hoped they would apologize, that they had realized their mistake and wanted me to come back. Instead, the conversation felt like talking to distant acquaintances. "Oh, we figured you were staying with friends," my mother said casually. "Brandon's been using the extra space in the living room for his merchandise storage, so it worked out well." Not once did they ask if I was safe, if I had enough money, or when I would return. They had simply adapted to my absence and filled the space I had left. "By the way," my father added before hanging up, "we put your boxes in the garage to make more room. Some of them might get a bit damp when it rains, just so you know." After the call, I sat on Jenna's bathroom floor and sobbed. The realization that I was completely disposable to my family was devastating. All those years of being the responsible one, the achievable one, none of it mattered. I was an afterthought, easily replaced by Brandon's gaming equipment and merch boxes. A turning point came 3 weeks into my job at Harvest Table when Dr. Larson, my former economics professor, came in for dinner. I had always admired her sharp intelligence and no-nonsense approach, and she had written one of my recommendation letters for a scholarship application. Allison, she said, surprised to see me serving tables. What are you doing here? I thought you were at Westlake. Over her meal, I explained my situation, the financial setback, the return home, and the shocking betrayal by my family. Dr. Larson listened intently, her expression growing increasingly concerned. That's unacceptable, she said firmly when I finished. A student of your caliber shouldn't be sidetracked like this. I'm working on a research project that needs an assistant. The pay isn't much, but it's flexible hours and relevant experience for your degree. I accepted her offer immediately. The research assistant position was only part-time, so I continued working at Harvest Table as well, but now with a purpose beyond just survival. The work with Dr. Larson reconnected me to my academic goals and reminded me of the future I was fighting for. With 2 jobs, I could finally afford to move out of Jenna's apartment. I found a room in a shared house with 2 roommates, Tara, a nurse, and Miguel, a financial analyst. The house was old and my room was the smallest, but it was mine. I bought a second-hand bed frame, a desk from a thrift store, and slowly began rebuilding my life. My new roommates became unexpected sources of support. Tara, who worked night shifts at the hospital, would leave homemade meals in the fridge with notes saying "Eat this, Allison." Miguel, noticing my interest in finance, would share articles and books about investment strategies. Your parents really did a number on you, Tara said one evening as we shared a rare dinner together. Family is supposed to lift you up, not tear you down. I keep wondering what I did wrong, I admitted. Why Brandon deserved their support more than me. You didn't do anything wrong, Miguel insisted. Some parents just pick favorites. My father was the same with my brother. It's their failure, not yours. Meanwhile, Brandon's streaming career seemed to be flourishing, at least according to social media. My parents posted proudly about his growing follower count and the new equipment they had purchased for his business. Not once did they mention me or wonder publicly how I was doing. I stopped checking their social media accounts when I realized it was only hurting me. Instead, I focused on building my new life, one where I was valued for who I was, not dismissed for who I wasn't. 3 months after leaving home, I was helping Kyle update the Harvest Table website. He had noticed my computer skills and asked if I could redesign the outdated site to attract more customers. It was a welcome creative outlet, and Kyle offered to pay me extra for the work. As I scrolled through the restaurant's payment records to set up the new online ordering system, a username caught my eye, Howard J. Anderson 45. It was my father's typical online handle, his name and birth year. He had made multiple payments to the restaurant over the past month, even though my parents rarely dined out due to budget constraints. Curious, I clicked on the payment history. The transactions weren't for food, they were donations to a fundraising campaign Kyle had set up for his nephew's medical expenses. Each donation was substantial, $200, $350, $500. Kyle, do you know this person? I asked, pointing to my father's username. Kyle glanced at the screen. No, but he's been one of our biggest donors. Must have a generous heart. A generous heart that couldn't help his own daughter, I thought bitterly. That evening, I couldn't shake the image of those donation amounts. My father had always claimed financial struggles whenever I needed anything for school, yet here he was donating hundreds of dollars to a stranger's cause. Out of morbid curiosity, I looked up Brandon's streaming channel. I hadn't watched it since leaving home, unwilling to see my childhood bedroom transformed into his gaming headquarters. What I discovered shocked me to my core. Brandon's channel had a donation leaderboard, and at the top was a familiar username, Howard J. Anderson 45. According to the publicly visible information, my father had donated over $5,000 to Brandon's channel in the past 3 months alone. $5,000. The amount I needed to return to school. My hands shaking, I dug deeper. Brandon had recently posted a setup tour video, proudly showcasing his streaming equipment. The video revealed additions that hadn't been there when I left, a new green screen, professional lighting system, and what he called his streaming PC separate from his gaming PC. Big thanks to my sponsors, Brandon said in the video, winking at the camera. The comment section was filled with viewers asking about his sponsors, to which he replied vaguely about family support. That night, I called my mother for the first time in weeks. She answered on the fourth ring, sounding distracted. "Allison? Is everything okay?" "I'm fine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was just wondering how things are at home." "Oh, busy as usual. Your father's been working overtime, and Brandon's channel is really taking off. He might hit 10,000 followers this month." "That's great," I said, then added casually, "the new equipment in his room looks expensive." There was a pause before my mother replied. "Well, we've had to make some investments. Your father took out a second mortgage on the house. We see it as investing in Brandon's future." My stomach dropped. "A second mortgage? Mom, that's a huge financial risk." "Sometimes you have to take risks for your children's dreams," she replied defensively. "What about my dream of finishing college? That wasn't worth investing in?" My mother sighed. "Allison, you've always been the independent one. Brandon needs more support." "What happened to my things in the garage?" I asked, changing the subject. "The boxes that might get wet." Another pause. "Well, we had to make some space. We sold some of the items you left behind." "Nothing important." "What items exactly?" "Just some old books and that jewelry box from your grandmother. Brandon needed a new microphone setup, and we were short that month." "The jewelry box." The antique silver box containing the pearl necklace and earrings my grandmother had given me before she died, telling me they would be for my wedding day someday. The one possession I had left at home, believing it would be safe because it was irreplaceable and clearly marked as a family heirloom. "You sold Grandma's pearls?" My voice cracked. "They were meant for me. She specifically gave them to me." "It was for the family, Allison," my mother justified. "Brandon's success will benefit all of us eventually." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence in my small bedroom. They had sold my inheritance, my history, my future, for Brandon's fleeting internet fame. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. That night, I sent Brandon a direct message. "I know about the second mortgage. I know about Grandma's pearls. How can you let them do this?" His response came hours later. "Not my problem if they want to support my career. Maybe if you had a real talent instead of just studying all the time, they would support you too." Reading his words, something shifted inside me. The hurt and betrayal crystallized into resolve. I would no longer allow myself to be erased from my own family. I would no longer enable their toxic dynamic by hoping for scraps of affection or recognition. That night, I made 3 decisions that would change everything. I would block my family on all social media platforms, I would not reach out to them again, and I would rebuild my life so thoroughly that I would never need their support again. For the first time since being kicked out of my own room, I felt a sense of clarity and purpose. They had chosen Brandon. Now, I would choose myself. 6 months after leaving my parents' house, my life had transformed in ways I never imagined. My part-time research position with Dr. Larson had expanded to include work on a groundbreaking economic study that caught the attention of the university administration. She had become not just an employer but a mentor, guiding me through both academic and personal challenges. "You have a natural talent for research and analysis," she told me one afternoon as we reviewed data for the study. "The department has additional funding for the next phase of this project. I'd like to increase your hours and your pay rate." The increase meant I could cut back on some of my restaurant shifts, giving me more time to focus on my academic future. Kyle was understanding about my reduced availability, and even offered me a leadership position at Harvest Table. "You've got a head for business," he said, noticing how I'd reorganized the inventory system and suggested menu changes that increased profits. "How about becoming assistant manager? Better pay, more regular hours." Between the 2 positions, I was not only staying afloat but beginning to save money again. I opened a dedicated savings account labeled Westlake Return Fund and watched with satisfaction as the balance grew each month. My social life had expanded too. Tara and Miguel had introduced me to their friends, creating a support network I had never experienced before. On my 25th birthday, they surprised me with a small party at our shared house, complete with homemade cake and thoughtful gifts. To Allison, Miguel toasted, raising his glass. Who proved that family is who treats you like you matter? I nearly cried at his words. That same day, I had received a generic text message from my mother, "Happy birthday, honey. Brandon hit 15K followers yesterday. So proud." The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Miguel, who worked as a financial analyst, began teaching me about investment strategies and money management. "If you're serious about financial independence, you need to think long-term," he explained, showing me how to create a diversified portfolio even with my limited funds. I absorbed everything he taught me, applying the same dedication I had once given to my studies. My experience at Harvest Table had also awakened an interest in business operations that I hadn't recognized before. "You know," Kyle said one day as we reviewed the quarterly numbers, "with your education background and practical experience here, you could run your own place someday." His casual comment sparked something in me. I began to see possibilities beyond just returning to college to finish my degree. What if I could build something of my own? I started developing a business plan in my spare time. It was nothing fancy at first. Just notes about restaurant management, customer trends, and operational efficiencies I'd observed. But it grew into a comprehensive strategy for a future cafe concept that would combine my passion for business with the practical skills I'd gained. Dr. Larson reviewed my business plan and was impressed. "This is graduate-level work, Allison. Have you considered applying for the business program again? With your practical experience now, you might qualify for additional scholarships." Encouraged by her feedback, I submitted my application for readmission to Westlake University for the upcoming fall semester. The application included letters of recommendation from both Dr. Larson and Kyle, highlighting my professional growth and practical business experience. 3 weeks later, an email arrived from Westlake's admissions office. With trembling hands, I opened it to find that I had been accepted with a partial scholarship, larger than my previous one. I sat on my bed, staring at the acceptance letter on my screen, overcome with emotion. 6 months ago, I had been sleeping on a couch, my possessions in boxes, my future uncertain. Now, I had a clear path forward, one I had forged myself without family support. That evening, I shared the news with my roommates and colleagues during a small dinner at our house. "I knew you could do it," Tara said, hugging me tightly. "Westlake is lucky to have you back," Dr. Larson added. Kyle raised his glass. "To the future business mogul. Just don't forget us little people when you're running an empire." Their genuine happiness for my success was overwhelming. These people, who had known me for less than a year, showed more pride in my achievements than my family ever had. As my confidence grew, so did my online presence. I started a small blog documenting my journey of independence, sharing practical advice about budgeting, finding housing, and building a support network. To my surprise, the blog gained followers quickly, particularly among young people navigating similar family dynamics. "Your story resonates because it's real," one commenter wrote. "You're showing that it's possible to rebuild after family betrayal." The blog became another source of income through affiliate marketing and partnerships with financial education platforms. It wasn't substantial, but it was mine, something I had built from my own experience and determination. With each passing day, the painful memory of being kicked out of my room became less sharp. I no longer defined myself by what I had lost, but by what I was creating. The girl who had driven away from her childhood home with boxes of belongings and a broken heart was becoming a woman who understood her own worth. 9 months after leaving home, I received an unexpected call from my mother. I had been limiting communication to brief text exchanges on holidays, protecting my mental health from their indifference. Seeing her name on my phone screen made my stomach tighten. "Allison? Can you talk?" Her voice sounded strained, lacking the casual dismissiveness I had grown accustomed to. "I'm at work, but I have a few minutes," I replied, stepping outside the restaurant for privacy. "It's about your father," she said, her voice cracking. "He lost his job last week. The company downsized, and his entire department was eliminated." I leaned against the wall, unsure how to respond. "I'm sorry to hear that," I finally said, meaning it despite everything. "There's more," she continued. "We're behind on the mortgage payments, both mortgages. The bank sent a foreclosure notice yesterday. We have 60 days to catch up on payments or we'll lose the house." My mind raced, calculating what this meant. The second mortgage they had taken out to fund Brandon's streaming equipment. The financial risk I had warned them about. "What about Brandon's streaming income?" I asked, already knowing the answer. My mother's bitter laugh confirmed my suspicions. "That's the other thing. His channel has been losing viewers for months. Some new game came out, and all the viewers moved to streamers who specialize in it. He's making less than $200 a month now." "And the expensive equipment? The second mortgage?" "Underwater," she admitted. "We owe more than the equipment is worth, and no one wants to buy used streaming gear now that everyone's doing it." I closed my eyes, processing this information. Part of me felt vindicated. Their gamble on Brandon's internet fame had failed, just as I had predicted. But another part ached for the family home I had grown up in, the only stability I had known before college. "What are you planning to do?" I asked. A long pause followed. "Well, that's partly why I'm calling. We were hoping, maybe you could move back home. Help with the bills until your father finds another job. 3 incomes might be enough to keep the house." The irony wasn't lost on me. 9 months ago, they had relegated me to the couch and sold my possessions. Now they wanted me to help save the home they had made clear wasn't mine anymore. "Let me understand," I said slowly. "You want me to move back to a house where I don't have a room, sleep on the couch, and contribute my income to pay for Brandon's failed streaming career?" "It wouldn't be forever," my mother said quickly. "Just until we get back on our feet. Family helps family, Allison." "Family helps family," I repeated. "Like when you sold Grandma's pearls without asking me? Or when you put my belongings in a leaking garage?" "That's not fair," she protested. "We were investing in Brandon's future. It could have worked out. But it didn't," I stated flatly. "And now you want me to clean up the mess." My mother's tone shifted from pleading to irritated. "I don't know why you've always been so competitive with your brother. He's really struggling right now. His whole dream has collapsed." "And what about my dream? The one you never supported?" "I'm finally getting back to college, Mom. I've worked incredibly hard to rebuild what I lost." "So you're just going to let us lose our home? After everything we've done for you?" The conversation was interrupted when Kyle poked his head outside, signaling that he needed me back inside. "I have to go," I told my mother. "I'll call you later." That evening, I shared the situation with Dr. Larson during our research session. She listened thoughtfully, her expression serious. "This is a classic case of toxic family dynamics," she said after I finished. "They excluded you when it was convenient, and now they're trying to pull you back in because they need something from you." Part of me feels guilty, I admitted. It is their house. My childhood home. Boundaries aren't about punishing others, Allison. They're about protecting yourself, Dr. Larson explained. The question isn't whether you should help your family. It's whether you can help them without sacrificing your own well-being and future. Her words resonated deeply. That night, I formulated a plan, one that would allow me to offer help without enabling the destructive patterns that had hurt me before. The next day, I initiated a video call with my parents, insisting that Brandon join as well. When their faces appeared on my screen, I was struck by how tired they looked. My father had aged visibly, dark circles under his eyes. Brandon sat sullenly in the background, his elaborate streaming setup still visible behind him. I've thought about your situation, I began, and I'm willing to help, but on my terms. My father leaned forward. What terms? First, I won't be moving back. I have a life here, a job, and I'm returning to university in the fall. Second, I can contribute $400 monthly toward household expenses, not the mortgage, but utilities and groceries. Third, this help comes with conditions. What conditions? My mother asked warily. Brandon gets a real job, not streaming, but actual employment with regular hours and consistent income. Dad applies for at least 5 jobs every day until he finds employment. And you create a realistic household budget that doesn't involve taking on more debt for non-essentials. Brandon scoffed from the background. So you're just going to dictate how we live now? Pretty rich coming from someone who abandoned the family. I didn't abandon anyone, I replied calmly. I was kicked out of my room and had my possessions sold without my consent. I'm offering help now, but not at the expense of my own well-being. My parents exchanged glances, clearly surprised by my confident tone and clear boundaries. I was no longer the daughter desperate for their approval. I was an adult offering conditional assistance to other adults. We appreciate the offer, my father finally said, but $400 won't make much difference with the mortgage payments we're facing. We need more substantial help. If you moved back. That's not an option, I interrupted. These are my terms. Take them or leave them. This feels like you're punishing us, my mother said accusingly. No, I'm protecting myself while still offering help. There's a difference. The call ended with no resolution. My parents said they would think about it, but their expressions made it clear they had expected me to rescue them unconditionally. Brandon had stormed off before the call ended, muttering about my holier-than-thou attitude. After hanging up, I felt a complex mix of emotions, guilt for not doing more, anger at their continued expectations, and pride in maintaining my boundaries. For the first time, I had faced my family as an equal, not as the daughter desperate for scraps of approval. The next day, I received a text from my father, "We've discussed your offer. Thank you, but we'll figure this out ourselves. Brandon is looking into moving his streaming equipment to a smaller space so we can rent out his room for extra income." I read the message several times, recognizing it for what it was, a final assertion of their choice. Even facing financial ruin, they couldn't accept help that required Brandon to make sacrifices. He remained the priority, even now. With a strange sense of peace, I replied simply, "I understand. The offer stands if you change your mind." Then I blocked their numbers and returned to building the life they had never believed I deserved. 10 months after being forced out of my childhood home, I implemented a comprehensive strategy for my future, one that accounted for both my immediate needs and long-term goals. The rejection of my help by my parents had freed me from the last vestiges of guilt and obligation. Now, I could focus entirely on my own path forward. First, I restructured my finances with Miguel's guidance. "You need 3 separate funds," he advised. "An emergency fund with 6 months of living expenses, your education fund for returning to Westlake, and a long-term investment fund for future growth." I followed his advice meticulously, allocating portions of each paycheck to the appropriate accounts. The discipline that had once earned me perfect grades now served me in building financial security. Within weeks, my emergency fund reached $3,000, enough to cover 2 months of essential expenses if necessary. At Harvest Table, Kyle continued to mentor me in business operations, recognizing my potential beyond my current role. "I'm expanding to a second location next year," he told me one evening as we closed the restaurant. "I'll need someone I trust to help manage both places. Someone who understands the business from the ground up." "Are you offering me a job after I graduate?" I asked, surprised by the implication. Kyle nodded. "With your business degree and practical experience here, you'd be invaluable. Plus, I can work with your school schedule until you graduate. Win-win." His offer provided both financial security and valuable career experience aligned with my degree. The flexible hours would allow me to attend classes while maintaining an income, solving the problem that had forced me to leave school originally. My blog about financial independence and rebuilding after family estrangement continued to grow, reaching readers across the country. I received messages daily from people in similar situations, seeking advice or simply connection with someone who understood their experience. Your posts about setting boundaries with toxic family members helped me find the courage to move out of my parents' house, one reader wrote. For the first time, I feel like I'm living for myself, not just surviving their expectations. The community that formed around the blog became another unexpected source of support. I organized virtual meetups for readers, creating a space where people could share resources and encouragement. What had begun as a personal outlet had evolved into a platform for healing and practical advice. Despite my efforts to move forward, I couldn't help occasionally checking Brandon's streaming channel, watching from an anonymous account. The elaborate setup he had once proudly showcased was clearly downsized. His streams became less frequent, his viewer count dwindling as newer games and trendier streamers captured his audience's attention. In one stream, he complained openly about his situation. "Parents are making me pay rent now," he grumbled to his few remaining viewers. "Totally unfair. They know I'm trying to build something here." The irony was painful yet validating. The golden child was finally experiencing consequences, though he still framed himself as the victim rather than acknowledging his role in the family's financial crisis. 3 weeks after our final conversation, I ran into a family friend, Mrs. Peterson, at the grocery store. She had been our neighbor for years and had often babysat Brandon and me when we were children. "Allison. How are you, dear? I haven't seen you around the neighborhood in ages." "I moved out last year," I explained vaguely. "I'm working and preparing to return to university." Mrs. Peterson's expression shifted. "Yes, I heard there was some difficulty at home. Your father mentioned you'd abandoned the family during their financial troubles." The characterization stung, but didn't surprise me. "That's not exactly what happened," I said carefully. "Well, they're having a tough time," she continued. "Your father is still looking for work, and they've had to rent out rooms to make ends meet." Brandon moved his computer things into the garage, I believe. "Into the leaky garage?" I couldn't help asking, remembering where my own belongings had been stored. Mrs. Peterson nodded. "Yes, though your father mentioned something about water damage to some equipment during the last big storm." "Such a shame." I felt a complex mix of emotions, sympathy for my parents' genuine struggle, vindication that Brandon was finally experiencing consequences, and lingering hurt that they had characterized me as abandoning them rather than acknowledging their role in pushing me away. "If you speak to them," I said, "please let them know my offer of help still stands, but my conditions haven't changed." That evening, I channeled my conflicted emotions into productive outlets. I worked on scholarship applications for the upcoming semester, applied for a small business grant for my future cafe concept, and wrote a blog post about managing complex emotions when estranged family members struggle. Dr. Larson reviewed my scholarship essays, providing valuable feedback. "Your personal statement is compelling," she said. "The admissions committee will be impressed by how you've overcome obstacles and gained practical experience during your time away from school." "Do you think I'm being too harsh with my family?" I asked her, the conversation with Mrs. Peterson still weighing on me. "Should I help them unconditionally, despite everything?" Dr. Larson considered her response carefully. "Allison, there's a difference between being cruel and maintaining healthy boundaries. You offered help with conditions designed to address the root problems. If they choose not to accept those conditions, that's their decision, not your failure." Her words helped me process the guilt that occasionally surfaced. I wasn't abandoning my family, I was refusing to enable patterns that had hurt all of us, including them. As the 11-month mark of my departure approached, I completed my application for a full scholarship at Westlake. The application required an essay about overcoming adversity, and for the first time, I wrote honestly about my family experience without shame or self-blame. The greatest lesson I learned when my family converted my bedroom into my brother's streaming studio wasn't about betrayal, I wrote. It was about resilience. I discovered that I could build a life and support system from scratch, that my worth wasn't dependent on being chosen by others, and that true family is defined by mutual respect and support, not merely biological connections. Dr. Larson called the essay powerful and authentic when she reviewed it. This is the kind of personal statement that resonates with scholarship committees, she assured me. You've transformed a painful experience into wisdom and growth. As I prepared to submit the application, I realized how far I had come from the devastated young woman who had driven away from her childhood home with boxes of belongings and a broken heart. I had built a life that reflected my values, surrounded myself with people who genuinely supported me, and created a future based on my own merits and efforts. The girl who had been disposable to her own family had become a woman who knew her irreplaceable worth. Exactly 1 year to the day after discovering my room transformed into Brandon's streaming studio, I received the email I had been waiting for. The Westlake University Scholarship Committee had reviewed my application and awarded me a full scholarship for my remaining semesters. The financial obstacle that had derailed my education was finally removed. I sat at my desk, staring at the acceptance letter on my screen, overwhelmed with emotion. 1 year ago, I had felt utterly lost and betrayed. Now, I had secured my future through my own efforts and the support of the chosen family I had built around me. As I prepared to call Dr. Larson with the news, a knock sounded at my door. Assuming it was Tara or Miguel, I opened it without checking the peephole. Brandon stood in the hallway, looking nothing like the confident streamer I remembered. His shoulders were hunched, his expression uncertain. The designer clothes had been replaced by a plain t-shirt and jeans. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual bravado. Stunned, I stepped aside to let him enter. My small room felt even smaller with him in it, the space filled with unspoken history between us. "How did you find my address?" I asked, closing the door. "Dr. Larson," he admitted. "I went to her office at the university looking for you. She made me promise I wasn't here to cause problems before she told me where you lived." I made a mental note to thank Dr. Larson for her protective instincts, even as she facilitated this unexpected reunion. "Why are you here, Brandon?" He looked around my room, taking in the organized desk, the vision board above it filled with goals and achievements, the bookshelf stocked with business and finance texts. "You've done well for yourself," he said, avoiding my question. "I had to," I replied simply. "No one else was going to do it for me." Brandon winced at the implied criticism but didn't argue. Instead, he sat on the edge of my bed, uninvited. "The house is being foreclosed," he said bluntly. "We have to be out by the end of the month." Though I had expected this outcome, hearing it confirmed still felt like a punch to the gut. The home where I had grown up, where despite everything, I had formed my earliest memories and sense of self, would soon belong to strangers. "What about Dad's job search?" I asked. "He found something, but it pays less than half what he made before." "Too little, too late." Brandon stared at his hands. "Mom's working extra shifts at the insurance office, but it wasn't enough to catch up on both mortgages." I leaned against my desk, processing this information. "And you're streaming?" A bitter laugh escaped him. "Dead. Turns out I was just riding a temporary trend. When it shifted, my viewers disappeared overnight. The equipment is mostly sold now, what didn't get ruined in the garage flooding." "So what's your plan?" I asked, suspecting I already knew the answer. Brandon finally met my eyes. "I hate to ask, but, could I crash on your couch? Just for a week or two until I figure something out." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. 1 year ago, I had been the one relegated to the couch, my possessions in boxes, my future uncertain. Now our positions were reversed. Part of me wanted to remind him of how he had dismissed my discomfort then, how he had claimed the couch wasn't that bad for temporary sleeping. Part of me wanted the satisfaction of turning him away as I had been turned away. But I recognized that impulse for what it was, a desire to inflict the same pain I had experienced. And I had worked too hard to build a life based on my values to compromise them now for momentary satisfaction. You can stay, I said finally, but there are conditions. Brandon's relief was visible. Anything. Name it. First, this is temporary, 2 weeks maximum. Second, you need to apply for jobs every day while you're here. Real jobs, not streaming or influencer positions. Third, you contribute to household expenses, groceries, utilities, whatever you can afford. That's fair, he agreed quickly. And fourth, I continued, you need to acknowledge what happened last year. Not just to yourself, but to mom and dad too. The favoritism, the entitlement, the second mortgage for your equipment, all of it. Brandon's expression clouded. They were just trying to support me. They enabled you, I corrected. And it cost all of you everything. If you're going to stay here, you need to take responsibility for your part in what happened. A long silence followed as Brandon wrestled with this final condition. Finally, he nodded. You're right, he admitted, the words seeming to physically pain him. I took advantage. I knew they would give me whatever I wanted if I pushed hard enough. I knew it wasn't fair to you. His admission surprised me. I had expected more resistance, more justification. What changed? I asked. Reality, he said simply. When the viewers disappeared and the money dried up, I saw how much had been sacrificed for something so fleeting. Mom and Dad lost their house. You lost your family. And for what? So I could play video games on camera? Brandon looked around my room again, his expression thoughtful. You built all this yourself in a year. No help, no shortcuts. Meanwhile, I had everything handed to me and ended up with nothing. The conversation was interrupted by my phone ringing, Dr. Larson calling to check if Brandon had arrived safely. As I assured her that everything was fine, I saw Brandon examining the acceptance letter still open on my laptop screen. You got the scholarship, he said when I hung up. Full ride? I nodded. I just found out today. Congratulations, he said, and for the first time in our relationship, I heard genuine admiration in his voice. You deserve it. The next 2 weeks brought changes I never could have anticipated. Brandon slept on my couch but spent his days applying for jobs and attending interviews. To my surprise, he was offered a position at a local electronics store within 10 days, nothing glamorous, but a start. The manager was impressed that I knew so much about computer components, Brandon explained. All that streaming equipment research actually came in handy. With my guidance, he found an affordable studio apartment within walking distance of his new job. It was small and basic, but it was within his means. Our parents called regularly, still adjusting to their new reality. They had found a 2-bedroom apartment in a less desirable neighborhood, downsizing from the 4-bedroom house they had lost. The transition was difficult for them, their pride wounded by the public nature of their financial collapse. The most surprising change came during a video call with all of us present. My father, looking older than his years but somehow more authentic than I remembered, addressed me directly. Allison, I owe you an apology, he said, his voice steady but emotional. We failed you as parents. We took your responsibility and self-sufficiency as permission to focus all our attention and resources on Brandon. We justified it by telling ourselves he needed more support, but the truth is, we just found him easier to please. My mother nodded beside him, tears in her eyes. When you offered to help with conditions, we were offended because you were asking us to face truths we weren't ready to acknowledge. If we had listened to you then, things might have turned out differently. Their apology, though late, was meaningful. I didn't offer empty platitudes or immediate forgiveness, but I acknowledged their words. Thank you for saying that, I said simply. It matters to me that you recognize what happened. Over the following weeks, we began rebuilding our relationship on new terms. Not as the dysfunctional family we had been, with Brandon at the center and everyone else orbiting his needs, but as adults with mutual respect and clear boundaries. I helped Brandon furnish his apartment with second-hand finds, teaching him the budgeting skills I had developed over the past year. He proved a surprisingly apt pupil, perhaps because necessity had finally stripped away his sense of entitlement. "I never understood why you worked so hard all those years," he admitted as we assembled a desk we had found at a thrift store. "I thought you were just boring, too serious about everything. Now I get it. You were preparing for reality while I was living in a fantasy." A month after Brandon's unexpected appearance at my door, I helped him move into his studio apartment. It was a milestone for both of us, his first truly independent step, and my final act of helping him transition to self-sufficiency. As we carried the last box inside, Brandon turned to me with an expression I had never seen before: genuine respect. "You know what I realized," he said. "You were always the strong one. Not just academically or whatever, but as a person. You knew who you were and what you wanted, even when no one supported you." His words touched something deep within me, healing a wound I hadn't realized was still open. "It wasn't easy," I admitted. "There were many nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering why I wasn't enough for them, for all of you." "You were more than enough," Brandon said quietly. "We just couldn't see it because we were too blinded by our own issues." "I'm sorry, Allison. Truly." 2 days later, I began packing my own belongings for the move back to Westlake University. My scholarship would cover tuition and housing, allowing me to focus fully on my studies while maintaining my research position with Dr. Larson. Kyle had promised to hold my job at Harvest Table for holiday breaks and summer vacation. As I folded clothes into suitcases, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. I had lost my childhood bedroom and family support, but gained independence, resilience, and a clearer understanding of my own worth. The painful rejection had ultimately freed me to build a life aligned with my values, surrounded by people who genuinely supported my growth. My phone buzzed with a text from Brandon: "Good luck at school. You're going to crush it. Thanks for not giving up on me even when I deserved it." 1 year ago, I had driven away from my childhood home with boxes of belongings and a broken heart, feeling utterly disposable to the people who should have valued me most. Today, I was preparing to return to university with a full scholarship, a support network of chosen family, and the confidence that came from rebuilding my life from scratch. The room I had lost had been replaced by something far more valuable, a future I had created on my own terms. Have you ever had to rebuild after a family betrayal? What gave you the strength to move forward? Share your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and self-discovery. Remember that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to rise after falling. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the strength to write your own happy ending, whatever challenges you face.